On today's show, the Capitals don't have an injury problem, they have an identity problem.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the injury luck is turning into a pattern, and that's dangerous. As the injuries keep mounting up, we hear about Jacob Chychrun. We hear about Justin Sordiff. We're losing too many players. We need a whole lot more coming back. What's the latest with the injury front? I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about the Caps can survive injuries, but only and only if the core steps up. But just to get it going here, the Capitals are barely holding it together, and Tom Wilson changes everything. The emotional barometer of this team has been sidelined due to injury. Of course, the good news is that he's at practice and day to day. So it seems to me, based on all of those things, that his return is fairly imminent. That is the hope anyway. So let's just start here anyway, because the truth is the Caps without Tom Wilson are not the same hockey team. Full stop. And I don't care if you won 7-4 against Anaheim. The Dallas game told you everything you need to know right now. 2 teams that were not playing some of their best hockey. I'm talking about the Ducks and the Stars. Yeah, the Stars started out the season really well and then lost a string of games before they played the Capitals. But it's very telling, and it's easy to get sucked in to emotion. Like, oh, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. Oh, they won one. Yes. Oh, wait, we're still this team again. And that's ultimately where the Capitals are at with all of the pieces in place. And when I say all of them, I mean Tom Wilson, Alexei Protas, Chychrun, Sordiff, these kind of guys. We're kind of resigned to the fact that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be out for a bit. They're a team that's okay. So when you minus the big guns like Wilson, like Protas, potentially Chychrun and Sordiff, things can get ugly in a hurry. And again, I've said it. We've all said it. All the beat writers, Chris Patrick needs to make some moves. And Spencer Carbery said there's a chance Tom Wilson and Alexei Protas play on this road trip. A chance. A chance is the operative word there. And that quote that jumped out at me immediately was Carbery saying, quote, pro, as in Alexei Protas is closer than Willie, unquote, which means Tom Wilson, of course. So it seems like it's still going to be a bit. And the hard part about all of that, and yes, I am a standings watcher because that's what it's all about, checking the Metropolitan Division. The Capitals have 50 points and are in 4th place in the Metro. Hurricanes 57, Islanders 52, Flyers 52. That, it's not out of touch, but if they lose these games coming up here, it could be spinning out of control in a hurry because underneath of them, the Penguins, 51 points, the Devils 46 points. And, a lot of those things are games in hand, all that kind of thing. But the Capitals, suffices to say, need to put the pedal to the metal, to use a really old phrase. But it is true. And that right there, that's the headline. Pros closer than Willie. And to be clear here, Alexei Protas has been playing a lot better. than he has been to start the season. So it will be nice return. But Tom Wilson, man, he's the engine. He leads the team in goals with 22, leads the team 42 and 41 games, and he hasn't even practiced yet since that Blackhawks game. And guess what? We got the Blackhawks on deck again here. So when Carbs calls it, quote, a long shot, unquote, for Chicago, believe it. And, Chicago, what did we find out in the last game? That despite what you see in the standings is a really good young upstart team. There's a lot of these young burgeoning teams around the league, right? The Sharks now, wow, the Sharks, the Sabres, these kind of teams that are kind of surprising a lot of people, right? And I think that you don't want to discredit them because currently the Blackhawks are in 5th place here with 43 points. So, not a horrible team, right in it. And when I watch them play, say they're playing on a night that the Capitals aren't playing, I'm always very impressed. Like I said, upstart, not quite where they need to be, but there are a lot of teams around the NHL. Like I say, they're just on the cusp of greatness. So the Capitals can spend no time squandering. And I don't think they try to squander. It's not working. You know what I mean? Have you ever been in a situation like that where it's just not working? And look, Protas coming back helps. He's a massive body. He drives plays. He stabilizes the top 6. But Wilson, he's the difference maker. In years before, it was Alex Ovechkin. And I'm not trying to discredit Ovechkin, but Tom Wilson's the guy. He's the one that's pulling the rope, stirring the drink in the offensive department. In one regard alone, there's a lot of other things that he brings, but Wilson dictates how opponents play to you. Without him, the Dallas Stars walked into Capital One Arena and sucked the life out of the building. You could feel it. And it was the shorthanded goal, right? That, it was one of those things like this is how we're going to start this whole thing. That is, like I said, that is what sucked it out of the arena. The Ducks game, fun, chaotic, high event, but Dallas showed what happens when a structured team plays a Caps lineup missing its heartbeat, that we need Tom Wilson back. And these are the kind of things that I talk about all the time on this show if you're an everydayer. This is going back to last season. This is going to the trade deadline when the only move that took place was bringing in Beauvillier. And the thought was the vibes, man, the vibes. The locker room's one of the best locker rooms in the NHL. Guess what? What happens if a bunch of players get injured? You're exposed. And right now, the Capitals are exposed to the weaknesses on the roster. I don't think I'm saying anything out of class here. And I don't mean to be the negative guy that's just kind of bludgeoning you with negativity, but it's the state of the Capitals right now. If there was a really nice story to talk about right now, trust me, I would latch onto it with both hands. But right now, it's a bit doom and gloom, and I hate to say that. But and one more thing, before we move on here, which might give the team a little bit of juice. Historically, it does. The mentors trip this weekend. Dads in the building, family energy, family vibes. Historically, the teams play that much better during these trips. They went 2-0 last year, but vibes don't score goals. Wilson does. And as it turns out, he looks like he will not be with the team, at least in the next game. I guess it remains to be seen after that. But I think that in those games, you still kind of want to impress dad or the mentor in your life, right? I think that those were the guys that watched you play when you were really young, first starting to skate, and you wanted to impress dad, right? And I think that even though these guys are full grown men playing at the top, the pinnacle of hockey, the National Hockey League, that they still want to impress dad. And I get it. There's always someone in your life like that you really want to show, hey, I've really got it. All right. So coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the injury luck is turning into a pattern, and it's a dangerous pattern. Straight ahead. There is nothing like being near the ice during the hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere, it's unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting tickets, long queues, endless screens, and prices changes at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pull up the Game Time app to check out the upcoming Capitals games and was surprised how easy and fast it was to grade seats. Already used it this season. I love it. And I know you will too. The app is incredibly easy to use. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets just took minutes. One of my favorite features is seeing the view from my seat before buying, so I know exactly what I'm getting. No surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That is LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. But if you have not done so already, go to lockedonCapitals.supercast.com. If you're on the YouTube side, the URL is right under my name. If you're on the audio side, one more time, lockedonCapitals.supercast.com. The thing that I like about it so much is you get access to the ad-free audio feed for Locked On Capitals, compatible with Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts, and an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server bonus, which includes a group chat just for listeners of Locked On Capitals. Listen, we can talk back and forth about trades and what needs to happen on the Discord server, or a little perk here for you. If you are an all-access member, you can text me directly. I can text you back. We can talk about the state of the Caps and moves that we think should take place. So go to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. There's also a link in the show notes. All right, welcome back to this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It is at Locked On Caps. So in the second segment here, the injuries surrounding this team are kind of the theme, kind of the dark cloud that's following this team around. And I get it. They're the Capitals. It's not a novel position to be in, that there are a lot of NHL teams that are dealing with injuries, but this injury luck is turning into a pattern. And ultimately, where it's getting uncomfortable, Jacob Chychrun leaves practice early. Justin Sordiff leaves practice early. Trainers involved. No update immediately from Carbs other than the classic quote, "I'll check in with Serbs," unquote. Talking about Jason Serbis, of course. And, you take a look at it. It's just one bad story after the other. And, in the final segment, I'll talk about the call-up of Leason back on this team that, we're kind of reaching towards the back of the cupboard here for players to fill the gaps out there. And, you're kind of seeing it out on the ice. And if you followed this team long enough, you know that sentence, "I'll check in with Serbs," can mean anything at the end of the day. Chychrun, as we know, has been absolutely a game changer for the Capitals this season, both on the blue line and offensively. Chychrun played 24 and a half minutes against Dallas, heavy workload, second early practice exit in less than a month. Has not missed a game yet, but let's be real, that's not nothing. I guess we don't know. That's where it's at. Maybe he's just like, "I'm really bruised up. I need to take a break." We don't know. But what we do know is that he left practice early. He's got 15 goals, 32 points for a stretch. He was literally leading the NHL in goals by a defenseman before Zach Werenski passed him. But like I said, suffices to say, still a lights-out defender, an offensive defenseman. He is the complete package. Now, for Mr. Justin Sordiff, kind of a mixed review on him, right? That his historic evening, scoring a hat trick as a rookie, something that has not been done in a long time. But then the following game, in the immaturity something that I have not seen that I can recollect in my entire life watching hockey, that the ref from the faceoff circle was telling him something, and the player's chirping back at him, like trying to defend himself, like a child trying to defend to his parent, like, I didn't do it, Dad, I promise. And the guy across from him is laughing like, what are we doing out here, guy? And then Connor McMichael's chirping in. I'm like, what are we doing? Are you so delusional that you played that well in the last game that you think you can run your mouth like that to the ref? I mean, I don't want to cast shade on a Capitals player, but that was a bad look. But anyway, Ad Sordoff, who, by the way, just had one of the most ridiculous nights from a rookie, 5 points against Anaheim, 3 goals, 2 assists, then boom, collision with Mike Michael, bloody nose, gauze afterwards. That, when this team is taking on water, it takes it on by buckets and buckets, and they need that to bail out this boat that's called the Capitals right now as they're taking on water, because they're just not playing that well. And again, it's not really something that I can explain for the most part. I know that there's injuries, but, like I said, even when all of those players were back, save Pierre-Luc Dubois, this team, at stretches was not playing some of its best hockey. But what we did see is that he did poke his head back into the locker room post-practice, sort of that is, which is good. But this team cannot afford to lose another forward with how thin things are. And that's where we're at, and it feels like it's falling on deaf ears. And it's not like I think that Chris Patrick is going to make a trade because Dan of Locked On Capitals says so, but it's not just me. You have all the different publications, the different blogs, what have you, from the DC area, and they're all saying roughly the same thing. Changes need to be made. And that could be a topic for an upcoming podcast. Ultimately, why Chris Patrick has not, are we waiting for something else? Are we just are we going to kind of tank it this season, in hopes of something grander next season? I don't want to think that's going to happen, but it's a bit curious that there have been 0 moves made. But here's the thing I'm going to really lean into here. The Capitals are playing too close to the edge health-wise. Heavy minutes, key guys leaned on constantly, Carlson, like I said, Chychrun, these kind of guys. And when injuries, when they start to stack up like this, it's not like bad luck anymore. It's strain. And, players logging heavier minutes, even if they're John Carlson, even if they're Jacob Chychrun and all the other minute monsters on the team, it takes its toll. So for a team that's already kind of just really, really behind it, behind the 8 ball, if you will, or just not where they need to be in comparison to last season, that these major injuries are proving costly. And, it's funny, you take a look at how much time Alex Ovechkin missed last season and how the Capitals were able to rally around him, that this team doesn't have that same pushback, right? It doesn't have that same tenacity. And it's ultimately what has put them in this position. I think that it's a confidence thing. I think it's the injury thing. But in any event, we don't have too much time to go, I would do good, but this team would play well, except got to figure it out. I mean, these are the issues that every NHL team faces. The Capitals have got to find a way. All right, so coming up here after the break, the Capitals can survive injuries, but only if the actual core steps up. Straight ahead. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. That is so exciting. I've loved using it so far. Each game, you'll get pack loaded with multiple profit boosts, and you can apply to the bets you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day, and you see what boosts you can apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defenses, quarterbacks, or coaching. There's so much to love. So let's be honest. The teams that we like are no longer in the playoffs, but you still have vested interest in the NFL playoffs. And FanDuel makes it that much more fun and, well, easy. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in the final segment of today's show, we're talking about survive or sink. That's the position that we're in. And you take a look at the injuries, and like I've talked about, you're facing the injuries, but can you step up? Can the core, can Alex Ovechkin, can John Carlson, can the pillars of this team rise up and turn this team around? Again, like I've talked about before, I think that this team needs an all-players meeting in the locker room, just like you remember years ago when Oshie talked about it. No press, no coaches, closed doors, and guess what? The Capitals went on a heater after that. And it's kind of interesting. You think to yourself, well, what difference can that really make, really, right? That, I don't know, the hows, the ands, ifs, or whys, but it got results. And that's where the Capitals are at. They need to dig deep. They need to do something to try to pick this team out of the muck and the mire that they're in. So let's zoom out here for a second. Wilson out, Protas out, maybe back soon. PLD still out, skating, but let's be honest, not close. That is three major forwards that they don't really have a clear replacement in Hershey. And you might be able to point to Ilya Protas. You might be able to point to different players, Andrew Crystal, but that's not in the NHL. So to say it's going to be plug and play, I think is hopeful at best. And yeah, every team deals with injuries. Like I said, the Capitals are no exception, but every team loses its leading scorer and two power forwards at the same time. That doesn't happen too often. It happened to the Capitals. And that's where they're at right now. And first, what do the Capitals need to do? Strategic call-ups. Again, we saw Leason called up, and I was like, yeah, I remember that guy. Played here and then has been playing with Anaheim, and I think he was with Minnesota for a while. He hasn't been with the Capitals in a minute here. I think the last time it was Laviolette was here and Sam Sonoff was between the pipes. So suffices to say it's been a while. He's back with the team. Again, kind of the MO of the Capitals reaching for those vintage vibes, if you will, just like when the Capitals had tried to bring back Vrana and Marcus Johansson and all these kind of things. The Capitals really like to make those kind of moves. But in any event, was that the right kind of move to make? And Brett Leason, like I said, is fine. He's an NHL body, but the Hershey Bears are stacked. Andrew Crystal, Ilya Protas, you can't just plug guys in randomly and hope. But with that said, would I like to see Ilya Protas and at some point Andrew Crystal? Abso-freaking-lutely. That I don't know if it's going to work. Am I going to tell you that Ilya Protas on this team is going to be the jumpstart this team needs? Maybe. I can't sign off on it, but I'll say this. It's sure worth a chance. Andrew Crystal, he is doing better in Hershey, maybe not as good as I thought he was supposed to do out of the gate. Is he worth a look on the big team? Absolutely. Especially, if we're going to be out with these players for a bit, you get a chance to see what you have in the tank. Now, the second thing, defense has to drive offense again. Earlier in the year, this blue line was dominant offensively. Now, quiet. Chychrun and Carlson have to create chaos, and they also need to bring physicality because Wilson and Protas aren't there to do it. So you're trying to manufacture offense from players that maybe that's not their skill set. Hopeful, you've seen it from Ethan Frank. We saw Justin sort of, really go on a tear there. But the pillars, I'm talking Ovi, the greatest goal scorer of all time, if he could really kick it into gear. Third, and this is the big one, the forwards. Paging forwards, you're needed out on the ice. And not just on the ice, warming a spot. You need to find the back of the net. Dylan Strome, 10 goals. Connor McMichael has 5. That's not enough, period. Those guys scored 29 and 26 last season. Again, that's where I'm at. What changed? And it's, kind of a redundant rhetorical question, I guess, because we don't know. I mean, the subtractions from this team in Mangiapane and Taylor Radish, definitely those two players are not enough to make this team be playing that much poor. And yes, Ovechkin, he's pacing for about 33 goals. Going into the season, I had said 35. So, I mean, I guess the projections are kind of evening out, even though some people are like, no, it's going to be 40 again. Listen, I would love to be wrong. I would love him to score 40 plus goals, but just on pace for 30. My initial projection was 35. Still great, but the margin is razor thin in the Metro, which I spoke about in segment 1, that there's still not that clear separation that you see in other divisions around the league. And that's where we're at. The team is fourth in the division. Flyers, Islanders, Hurricanes right there. No breathing room. Every night matters. No excuses. So here's the bottom line. If Protas comes back, good. If Wilson comes back, it could really change the fortunes of this team right now. But until then, the Capitals have to manufacture identity without their identity players. And that's not a knock on Ovechkin or Carlson. But let's be honest here. These players are not the same players they were, let's say, 5-10 years ago. And they're older, right? I mean, you're going to see diminished returns. But that's the thing that we're coming up on. If, as a matter of fact, this is Alex Ovechkin's final season, wow, what a big hole to fill. If the Capitals don't come to terms with John Carlson, wow, those are big shoes to fill. That's what I'm talking about. Changes need to be made, and either they're going to be made now or they're going to be made at the trade deadline, the off season, those kind of things. But I don't know, guys. It just seems like the brass around this team, Chris Patrick, Brian McClellan, unless they just do something that just totally is a mic drop, like, wow, you acquired this guy, that there's still going to be people going, oh my God, I can't believe we don't have this and that guy. It's going to cause pain, right? We're going to always be upset when one of our favorite players gets traded, but change is needed, and change we need right now. And I don't mean to be over the top here, but maybe we need to put the team on blast at Washington Capitals on Twitter. What are we doing here, guys? That it's still, early-ish in the season, right? That it is, right after the new year here, and we're already talking about this team kind of, maybe wild card at the end of the day. And that wouldn't be the end of the world, but I don't want it to come that close. I would like to see this team turn it around. They have the pedigree. They have the history of doing great things. I think they have some of the pieces in the locker room. Like I said in yesterday's show, 2 forwards would be great, and a defender. Ideally, if you're asking me what I think they need, 2 forwards, at least one of them a center, and another defender, because you got Chychrun, you got Carlson. But what if one of them gets injured? And then you got players that aren't really pulling their weight. That is what we need to do. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. And are you one of those that make this show successful? Are you someone that never misses an episode? Well, let me tell you something. The Everydayer Club is built just for you. Head on over to lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. One more time, lockedoncapitals.supercast.com. Ad-free episodes, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to the link in the show notes. And for those of you on the video side, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On the audio side, make sure and make your second listen NHL game night on Locked On NHL. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.